overwork myself led me to, what we now know as burnout, right?
Mhm.
And to the point of, being in the hospital 2.5 weeks, being told by my doctor, you're headed down a really ugly path, learning to control my nervous system, leveraging the ability to change my emotional state so that I can affect my whole physiology and help my brain actually operate better optimally. Then going back into that corporate environment, same toxic environment, my response to it was different. And so I started having different results and I started operating in a completely different way where it was a sustainable type of success.
Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project, changing the way the game is played. This podcast helps purpose driven leaders unlock their highest potential so that they can play their biggest impact game. Welcome back to the Leadership Launchpad Project, changing the way the game is being played. We are so excited to have you back this week and to introduce you to our fabulous guest, one of our favorite guests from the previous LOP platform, Sonia Relevik. That's where I want to go with you because I'm so used to calling you by your maiden name. She has been what started off as a client of mine a decade ago, and we have definitely become friends since. She's my birthday twin. I'm so excited to have her back on this show. We had such great feedback from your first interview. And so just as a reminder to introduce Sonia to our audience, so Sonia comes from the world of regulatory affairs. That's been her corporate MO for the last decade or so, I feel like. But recently, she's actually felt called to go on this entrepreneurial journey herself. She stepped into her CEO leadership stilettos, I want to say, not shoes, right? And she has started her own business in a very aligned space and place as ours, called Heart Vista Performance Co. Sonia, welcome back to the show, girl. It's so fabulous to have you back in studio.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love being here. Thanks for having me again.
So tell our audience, in case they missed the first time you were in, just a little tiny bit about your backstory and why you're stepping into your entrepreneurial stilettos at this point in your professional trajectory.
Yeah, so I mean, as Susan alluded, I've been in corporate for a while, and it was, one of those types of experiences for me as a type A personality, going along, trying to climb the corporate ladder, working, 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 always looking for that next milestone, the next promotion, but
Mm-hmm.
completely disassociated with myself,
Mm-hmm.
my somatic signals, what was actually true to me, and it led me to just overwork myself, led me to, what we now know as burnout, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to the point of, being in the hospital 2.5 weeks, being told by my doctor, you're headed down a really ugly path, right? And that I'll most likely need GI surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And so he said, stress is obviously a big contributor here. So you figure out how you're going to change your career or just prepare for ongoing health issues. And, for me back then, being again, sometimes the type A actually helps you because
Right?
you don't want to accept everything just for face value. So I went on my own little journey of trying to figure out, well, okay, how can I manage this stress, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
showing up and affecting all these areas of my life because I really liked what I was doing. I was traveling, I was supporting Health Canada audits. It was really interesting stuff in the biopharmaceutical world, and it was cutting edge technology and medicine that I was had the honor of bringing to the Canadian market. So it's not something you want to be sidelined and not be able to do. So going on this journey and figuring out what could actually help me manage stress in the moment, right? Because I needed something. I was very clear that I needed a technique that in the middle of a high pressure high stakes situation, I could get myself out of that stress, that survival response, and be able to calm myself, be able to regulate,
Mhm.
so that I could perform and make better decisions, right? So, having found what I now teach to other professionals and executives and entrepreneurs is biofeedback, and learning to work with my body, right? Learning to control my nervous system, leveraging the ability to change my emotional state so that I can affect my whole physiology and help my brain actually operate better optimally. And so then going back into that corporate environment, same toxic environment, my response to it was different. And so I started having different results and I started operating in a completely different way where it was a sustainable type of success. And I could continue to grow my career and I could continue to make an impact, but without burning out. And so, after I had my daughter, there was like an aha moment in me is there's a lot of stressed out people out there. Like there's a lot of people that are either going down the path that I went down, into burnout territory, um, and people that are sort of that need this support, and you're not going to get it from your doctor. You're not going to get it, from any type of sort of conventional path or system. And so I founded Heart Vista Performance. And so I work with execs, I work with entrepreneurs, really teaching them resilience because this is what it is. It's being able to be resilient in this sort of face of constant micro stressors throughout the day when you're in a productive, when you're in a corporate environment, and being able to, optimize the way you show up and be sustainable at it. So that's how I am. That's how I got here.
Well, that's amazing. And so as I'm listening to you, obviously there's so much that we all want to jump into and start to unpack here, but I want to go back a bit just for our audience who may be unfamiliar with what somatic signaling or somatic signals are, because I'm guessing that this is something that you obviously said you overlooked or you ignored it and that is somehow linked to burnout. So can we go back and just talk about what's a somatic signal? Specifically, like what were you ignoring that you felt like led to the burnout? And then how's that different from how you treat those somatic signals now?
Mm, excellent question. So somatic signals are really your body talking to you, right? It's there's a conversation constantly happening between our body and our mind. And when we're constantly focused on external, right? We're looking outwardly to see what we need to do, to see what our actions need to be to get to the next milestone, and we're not putting ourselves and our self-care, our ability to know what's right for us at the forefront. That's when we don't listen to those signals, right, to that language of our body. And so that could be, for me, what I was overlooking is this constant sort of tightness, right, in the chest. It can be sometimes people always talk about, where they feel stress or anger in the gut, right? This gut reaction that's telling you, it's giving you signals of what's right for you and what's not right for you. And when we disregard this, that's when we start to get into trouble, because what happens is that our body's not meant to operate under stress conditions nonstop, right? Chronic stress is not the state that we're meant to operate in and that we can thrive. And so over time, what ends up happening is sort of like this deterioration of your system. And then we get into that burnout territory. And it's like the body will keep talking to you, right? Those somatic signals will keep showing up. It's just they're going to get louder and louder and louder until you are forced to listen. So for me, it was literally such a pain in my body that there was no way I could stop and I could avoid or I could ignore it, right? Um, and so that's sort of the extreme effect of when we don't listen and when we're not in tune, right? So it's really being aware and understanding that there's an intelligence in our body that we can use, right? So this is what is very, very, I think, important to understand. It's not like, God, my body's like, the somatic signals, they're so annoying because they're slowing me down. Like they're telling me like, slow down. They don't want me to get out there and to play my A game. No, it's quite like it's the opposite. is when we can start to listen to that and start to understand, we can use it to our advantage and work with our body, right? Learn to regulate all those emotions and all that stress that's causing us to feel this way, to actually show up better, be able to, the 3 points of resilience is be able to prepare for, adapt, and recover from adversity and difficult situations. And so when you're able to encompass all those 3 points of resilience, you're able to have much better effects in your day to day.
That's such a TSN turning point for any high achiever listening out there, right? Because I feel like the thing that is such a roadblock, right, for high achievers is that they don't even know that they're operating via stress and hyperarousal in their nervous system. And they don't even know that that's stress because they're calling it motivation, right? Like they're just they've normalized this type of state in terms of their performance. And not only that, it's paired with disconnecting the wires, disassociating from those indicators somatically that are suggesting when they're actually in danger of burning themselves out and then thus in need of some active recovery, right?
I believe that we are a generation of leaders that are operating under a cortisol addiction. Like everyone is addicted to cortisol and to the stress state.
Our state becomes our norm. And you can't recognize the difference between burning out or this is just the normalcy of the job, and we accept it. You're being lazy, or I should be more productive, or I should be doing XYZ. And you're on this hamster wheel, right?
And
Just
your
constant.
nervous system is addicted to the
Correct.
adrenaline and the cortisol. This is the space I want to go with you so badly in terms of this, because I've been hearing about all of this around how energy management is the new time management. And I know that that's something that you're very passionate about, obviously, because you are helping people not only be in tune to those somatic indicators, right? But understand the method to the madness in terms of being responsive to them. In other words, practicing periodization and balancing out periods of active engagement with periods of active disengagement. So what are your thoughts in terms of that whole time manage or energy management is the new time management?
Yeah, well, when you think about it, we manage our money, our time, our calendars with so much intensity, and we put so much importance, right? But there's very little focus on arguably one of our most important assets, which is our energy. Because your energy is how you show up, right? Like think about your energy as this inner battery. And when you're running on empty, when you're running on low, even small triggers or small issues throughout the day really end up, you end up having a reactivity, over reactivity to certain things that normally, if your battery was a little more full, you wouldn't stress out over, you wouldn't react over as much. So your level of energy is just the way you transact with the world. It impacts so much of your results. And so I talk about, right, personal, really intelligent personal energy management being just as important as all of the other assets that you have to manage. And so what does that look like? Well, it looks like is understanding what your depleters are. So what is really depleting your energy and what are your chargers, and getting very clear on that. So for
Mhm.
example, we mentioned already micro stressors during the day. So the Harvard Business Review did a study. There's They found on average, the average professional has over 100 interactions, business interactions during the day. So these micro points of impact and relation are actually can produce as much stress as major stressors that we think about, like major
Mhm.
arguments and major opportunities where you really can pinpoint that this is something that was a point of contention or an
Mhm.
argument. So the volume, the velocity that we have in terms of those relational and that transactional points throughout the day is higher than ever before. So important that we take, I call them s'mores, that we take some s'mores throughout the day, small moments of recovery, right? Um,
Love that. Borrowing that
where
with your permission.
totally.
Yeah.
um, to be able to facilitate that recovery, right? And so what we work on is being able to down regulate, being able to breathe through the moment, so that you're able to, again, recharge that battery. And all
Mhm.
throughout the day, we're working with that inner battery, charging it up. And then, we know that we had a moment of depletion, right? When we had a
Mhm.
moment of stress, we're bringing back that into recovery mode. So how do we recover from that? Then I know I have a meeting, at 2 o'clock that's going to be, with some stakeholders that can usually bring me into a frenzy, right? Bring me out of my calm and composed state. So I'm going to prep. So I'm going to take my s'more and I'm going to prep for that meeting, right? Then how do I feel after that? Do I need to do take a s'more to recover? So it's this really, really intelligent way of being hyper aware of your state and how the interactions that you're having, big and small, throughout your day are impacting you. And so you're being really intentional about preparing, about adapting in the moment, and then about recovering. And I tell people then, when you're out of the office and when you have that time back to yourself, that's when you really tap into those chargers. So a charger could be, taking a phone call with a really fun friend, like that friend that is always going to be
Make you
upbeat
laugh,
and exactly make you
right?
laugh. And exactly, it could be going out and taking a walk,
Mhm.
right? And so you're always optimizing and you're keeping that inner battery in mind.
I have
Wow, like,
so many
sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
questions,
you go ahead, Shelley. I was just gonna
Sonia.
say though, like that is a level of mindfulness that is obviously like a power tool when it comes to,
Managing
regulating both,
pressure.
your nervous system and your emotional stuff. Anyway, I'm going to give Shelley a chance to
But
ask a
yeah,
couple other
no,
questions.
I mean, that's what I mean, right? I'd love to dig in, Sonia, on your thoughts on, because I've been in that position, right? Like executive ladder, 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 ladder. And I think the problem with the journey of that is that our state becomes our norm. And you can't recognize the difference between burning out or this is just the normalcy of the job, and we accept it. So what I'd love to understand is the awareness piece and the signals along the way. Because to your point, you're saying you've got a meeting coming up or whatever it might be. For a lot of high achievers and a lot of C-suite executives, that day is just the norm. So there's no real awareness that you can kind of pull yourself out and go, oh yes, this, and be able to pinpoint it because it's just the normalcy of your day. So where does the awareness come into play? Like kind of walk me through that, right? Is it like in the morning where you're looking at your day and going, okay, this might be an issue, this might be a problem, and you're identifying it pre-starting your day versus while you're in your day? Like what's the best method to the madness here?
Yeah, no, Shelley, you raise a really great point about what the norm currently is, because I believe that we are a generation of leaders that are operating under a cortisol addiction. Like everyone is addicted to cortisol and to the stress state. And how that shows up, that we don't even realize it, is this, for example, always wanting to check your email, right? Not being able to fully rest and recover. Like I'm just going to put things to the side and I'm just going to take some time for myself, right? It's always this need that if we're not being productive, then we're not doing what we should be doing, right? That's how cortisol addiction shows up. So how do you break that? Because that is your baseline, right? That is the way that you are currently operating, and don't know anything different because you can't feel anything different.
That's my point. How do you identify that?
So what we do is we start working with changing the emotional state. So we can actually on demand, when we learn biofeedback, we learn to change our emotional state irrespective of what's out around us, right? Irrespective of our environment. And so when I can teach a client to start to cultivate this feeling of appreciation, of care, of gratitude, you start to have distance. It's almost like taking a zoom, right? You're zooming out and taking a eye view of yourself and of your state. And so when you can start to differentiate between how it feels, right? Because when we practice our techniques, we're operating where we're sort of cultivating that experience of being in more calm and more expansive and more generative emotions.
Mhm.
And it allows you the ability to start to discern when you're back in the depleting emotions, when you're back in the frustration, when you're back in the angst, the anxiety. Anxiety and depression go together very closely, hand in hand. So a lot of the clients I work with as well fluctuate as well between feelings of depression. And so that is your first tool, is to again learn working with our body. That's why this, technique is so powerful, is because we can teach people how to shift their experience without anything outside of them changing, right? Like they don't have to take a pill, they don't have to go to the gym, they don't have to and they can choose what else they want to do. But in the moment here, that's not an externally focused activity that they need to do to change. And so that's that first piece, is like almost giving people a vacation from themselves, is when they can learn to activate some of those more replenishing emotions. And then from there, throughout the day, you're taking those sort of those little breaks, right? Those little moments of awareness, and that's where the s'mores really come in for me,
But doesn't
because it's
sorry, not to interrupt, but to that point, and that's something I just want to dig into, right? Is that you had mentioned just something about taking a vacation for yourself. I think a lot of high achievers and a lot of C-suite, and the problem with that is they don't think they're entitled to that. I know I didn't anyways, right? So it's the entitlement of can I take a break on this? Can I reassess how I feel about this? And yes, I've got this meeting and I just need to center myself here. Like you don't give yourself that allowance for some reason. It's a strange, I'm just going into the psyche of it. Like it's just strange how we just don't think that we're allowed to do that. Because to your point, you're being lazy, or I should be more productive, or I should be doing XYZ. And you're on this hamster wheel, right?
And
Just
your
constant.
nervous system is addicted to the
Correct.
adrenaline and the cortisol,
Correct.
which
Well,
goes full
yeah, and
circle
I
to what you
think
just
like
said.
type A people just take their energy resources for granted until
Mhm.
usually a brick wall moment, which Sonia, you mentioned that you had yourself. And typically for us, when we get our clients at Elite, it's usually because somebody's had a brick wall moment in some fashion. And so they know they need to do something different.
Mhm.
So, Sonia, when you're working with these type A type of people, I mean, do your clients generally have to have hit some sort of wall as well? Or are you able to or how do you get them to value this, as Shelley's saying, because they actually have to really overcome quite a few limiting beliefs about themselves in order to actually make space for this in their lives?
yeah, I know, absolutely. And it usually is some kind of crossroad that a client has come to where either they're sort of stuck in their career growth, they're not sure where to go, or they're experiencing some facet of burnout, right? Where they're just disengaged. They don't enjoy leading their team anymore. Or they're, as I mentioned, a startup founder that has just worked so hard to get to where they are. And they just keep going for that next milestone, thinking that at the next milestone, they'll start to feel better. It'll get easier and it'll get easier. And the fact is that for anyone growing a business, it never really gets easier. It's just a new level of opportunity and and a new level of hard.
New level,
It's
new
different, right?
devil. I know
A
you're
new
dying
level
to
of
say
normal, right?
it.
New level of
Yeah.
normal it becomes, right? And then we just accept that normal for what it is, I think, as well, right? Versus kind of putting it a bit under a microscope.
And also, high
Yeah. And
achievers use that busyness as avoidance. I just want to add that to this conversation because we also know that that is true, right, ladies? It's like, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. So they don't have to look at their emotional somatic indicators, right? Because then they'd actually have to do something about
Exactly. Oh, I see that so much, right? They
it.
know that it's going to spark a difficult change of some sort. And so it is. It's just easier to just
Mhm.
kind of keep going. And that's what you mentioned, Sonia, that you work with people who are, kind of wondering what direction to take. So how does this type of work actually help people like that?
Yeah, no, great question. And I want to also add to our previous conversation is
Mhm.
that what part really helps, I think a lot of people understand the value of this work. There's the personal wellness piece, right? It's like you're going to feel better, you're going to feel less stressed, but you're also going to optimize your brain's resources. And especially with founders, what they want is like to squeeze out every little drop of potential out of their
Yeah,
brain to
so
get as
true.
far as they can with the machinery they've got, right?
It's so true.
And so when you can show, right, through research, so we've got over 30 years of research, more than 500 independent published studies, all published in the American Journal of Cardiology, like that. This being able to self-regulate and slow down actually opens up parts of your brain, right? The prefrontal cortex that's responsible for executive decision making, for creativity, for ideation, for being able to perform at your absolute best. And so that brings it together to sort of be again, unfortunately, we need that external motivator sometimes, that it's like not about me, just me feeling better. Cause yeah, that's nice, but I want my project or I want my business or I want my team to be as successful as possible. And this is how we get there, right? Through this avenue. So, um, it's sort of a little bit of like dangling the carrot
Carrot.
and down the line for
You have to leverage these freaking leaders, right? In order to
yes.
make the case for why they should even consider slowing down off the treadmill.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I always just use one anchor line, and then it helps me create the curiosity that I need to take them on this journey of educating and empowering them with all of this in regards to like the benefits, right? But I always say you speed up by slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That's like a Navy SEALs quote right there too. But I mean, both point towards the same thing that we're talking about here, right? Is like the method to the madness is that when you actually gear down and you recover, you actually open up that cognitive bandwidth, that cognitive capacity that every leader needs to possess when they're at the helm under pressure with the high stakes and everybody's expectations of them in the spotlight. Is that you got to start to educate and empower them in regards to the neuroscience of what is actually going to open up and be available to them in their capacity.
What was the turning point for you, Sonia? Where I'm dying to know and curious where the light bulb moment went off for you and you're like, this is what I need to be doing.
Oh, I think for me it was deciding that the investment in myself and the investment in learning how to support myself so I can be the best person possible and get the best sort of life experience, because that's what it really is down to, like that I was worth it.
Love
Because
that.
as long as you're focused on the outside and you're looking for people and the next career promotion or the next business milestone to define how worthy you are, it's very hard to decide, okay, I'm going to take the resources, whether it's time, whether it's money, to start working on myself. And so it did take hitting that rock bottom and being in that hospital bed, laying there, you have a lot of time to think and reorganizing, my what I actually put worth on, right? What I actually
Mhm.
believe is gonna fulfill me and bring me to where I want to be, right? So a lot of high performers, it's like, or high achievers, it's looking at always, always, always what is that next sort of marker,
Milestone.
that check mark. Yeah, but also the check mark that's is going to tell me that I matter, that I'm doing a great job, that um right,
Yeah.
that I own my place, that I should be here in this position, or that I should be
Mm.
here in this marketplace offering what I have to offer, right? And so that for me was a really big, and that was working with Susan, right? Because that was a huge eye opener. Relationship with myself was like who was that? Like I had never heard of that before. And I think a lot
Non-existent,
of
like it is for
yeah,
every high achiever, right? What
I
is that? Who's that? Where's she hiding?
Well, I think it's to your point on that. What you just said too is it's about other people and how other people are going to perceive you. I think which we're so worried about making those changes in our lives, right? Even the
Mhm,
slowing down, right? To
mhm.
speed up, right? It's like, well, if I do that, how am I going to be perceived? And it's all about other people's perceptions that we're always so worried about, right?
Yeah, but that's what
100%.
every leader has to work out of their nervous system,
Correct.
right? Is all those social self-beliefs in terms of who do I need to be in order to gain acceptance and belonging in the tribe, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get into a leader, we talked about this with our last guest last week, right? In terms of the photography. But once you're in that spotlight, it's time to challenge all of those beliefs because those beliefs certainly are not going to help you achieve anything we're talking about today that's going to be sustainable, effective, efficient, productive, and highly impactful in terms of your leadership. The place I want to land with you today, Sonia, is we have a word this year that is an anchor word with our podcast. It's co-create. So we've been asking our audience to really hit us with their questions and anything that they want to hear us riffing on the podcast. And one of the questions that we received last week is in and around how can one overcome their fears? So I would love it if we could apply your methodology to that question. So if somebody comes to you with that needing to understand how to use this process to overcome their fears, how would you lead them through that?
Yeah, and I actually have a great example, and it ties in with Leanne's previous question around, when a client, any leader, any high performer comes and they're sort of at a crossroad, right? And deciding of where they want to take their career next. So that's what I'm working through with a client right now. And there's this sort of the shoulds, right? So someone that's an exec and that's headed for the C-suite, there's this expectation that they should take this opportunity because they have the skills, they know how to lead a team. There's very few people in the industry that can do what they can do. And so she owns it to herself to take that next step, right? And so that's the potential piece, right? And then you have sort of the purpose of what do you actually feel that you want to be doing with your time, with all the skills, the experience, this amazing sort of repertoire in a resume. How do you actually want to apply this to impact the world? What do you want your um, what do you want your legacy, right? You guys talk so much about legacy. What do you want your legacy to be, right? So it's the potential versus the purpose, and that's where fear actually comes in, right? Because a lot of times we feel fear to step out of the sort of the path that we've been on, and to step out and do something different. Because to Shelley's point, a lot of times it's perception. What are people going to think if I take some unorthodox role and move into doing something that maybe pays a little less, maybe something that's not as respected as being in the C-suite, but that would potentially fulfill me, like actually be really fun, and I would be engaged and I would want to get up every morning. And so someone once said to me, I actually, I just want to be fearless. Like, how do these leaders do it? They just look so fearless. And one thing I know for sure is that no one is fearless. It's just certain people learn to feel the fear and do it anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
so what that looks like within this system, right? Within what I work with is first we're acknowledging, right? So much of the time we just want to suppress the fear, or we want to run away from it, we want to ignore it. And then that's how it rules us actually, because whatever you don't acknowledge, it's still there under the surface. So
Mhm.
acknowledging it, learning how to regulate our emotional state, right? To turn down the intensity on that fear, and then acting from a place of inner balance rather than reactivity, learning how to cultivate the connection to your heart intelligence, right? To that part of you that knows what's right and what will fulfill you and what will allow you to keep expanding and keep growing. And so a lot of the time, it's just giving ourselves that permission to get still and to get quiet and to listen, right? And to bring that calm and that inner balance to our experience.
But fear can be a good thing, can it not? I mean, I've seen fear work in my favor and I've seen fear not work in my favor. And I think I'm trying it's trying to identify which fear is the good fear, right? Because there's fear that pushes you forward, and then there's exposure therapy to fear, where it's whatever it is. Let's say it's presenting, right? People have fear of presenting. You just get up and you get up and you do it and over and repetitive, and the fear goes away, right? That's good fear because it catapults you forward. How do you identify the bad fear?
I think it's this question that we're getting from our
I know.
audience,
Yeah.
right? Which is like, obviously, this is not fear that Sonia is suggesting we need to actually engage our nervous system so that we can really amp up the resources to show up to the pressure and the challenge and actually step into our flow and create amazing things. I feel like that's the good fear, right? Is like if we didn't have any arousal in our nervous system, we wouldn't get up off the couch and do nothing. But I think it becomes maladaptive, the fear, right? When it starts to become prohibitive to the things that we are knowing we want to engage in outside the comfort zone, but we just can't bring ourselves to get up off the chair with,
Yeah, it's
like
the avoidance piece is what you
it's,
mean.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's
Like,
where we know we want to go after something, but we
Yeah.
just can't. We're stuck, or we avoid, or procrastinate,
Yeah.
or
yeah, it's our relationship to the fear. And I think, yeah, what Sonia is talking about here is really looking at ways to, kind of lean into that and work with that. And I mean, a lot of that is obviously what we talk about when it comes down to, relationship with self too, right? Is just understanding that when it comes to fear, a lot of it is really just an automatic process is happening in our brain in relation to something, whatever it is, like some uncertainty about, as Shelley says, giving a talk or whatever. But when you kind of can consciously intervene and get that observer standpoint on it, then you can choose, as you say, Sonia, to move ahead, even in the face of fear, and understand that it is going to lead to your growth. Or, yeah, if it's like I guess, a really bad fear of like, I'm about to jump off of a cliff here or something, then maybe
Let's
that's
not do
where,
that.
yeah, that's where we just listen
I
to
did
the
that.
fear.
I highly recommend doing that, actually, if you're actually trying to get past your fear. 'Cause it's a wonderful assignment that teaches you how to surrender. No, this is what we talk about in our process all the time with high achievers. That pressure is a privilege, right? Like we need it to get into peak state and flow. I think that the biggest takeaway here is that, yeah, fear is supposed to kickstart you and get the wheels in motion, right? So that you can start to step into that courage that helps you actually leave the edge of that cliff. In my case, I had a parasail on top of me, thank God. So it was a highly expansive experience of growth. And I felt like I could do anything almost after actually seeing my fear through to the courage part. And that's where we develop more and more of our capacity. But if we can't actually leave the edge of that cliff, it's prohibitive, it's maladaptive, right? That's why I tell my clients the best way to get what you don't want is to fear it and stay in the fear of it, to not transmute the fear into something useful that is performance enhancing in some way, shape, or form that supports your growth.
I find too, in my experience coaching clients, is that there's sometimes, and maybe this is more common in women, the sense of the fear should be gone in order for me to move forward. Like if I'm feeling fear, it means I'm not ready. And
Mhm.
so then it stops you in your tracks because you're waiting to step in perfectly confident.
Ready.
Right. And
Yeah.
that moment isn't going to
Mhm.
come. I can't remember I read this, but it's just like, if you are moving forward, then yeah, fear is kind of the water you're going to be swimming in most of the time, because that is just what's going to happen when you're
Mhm.
up against, as Susan likes to say, your edges. So I just wanted to throw that in there because I know that that's just something very common. If our listener who asked the question about fear is listening to this one, it's, yeah, you don't let it stop you and don't have a read on it that this means I'm not ready. and I should just wait and perfect a little more behind the scenes before I put myself out there.
It's also about
And
control, right? Fear is about control as well, right? So if you kind of unpack the like what it does to you, right? It's lack of control. You're terrified, you're fearful of making the next move, the next promotion, whatever it might be in your life, right? It's lack of control potentially, right? So if you just let go of the control and let drive kind of through the fear, especially in myself and what I found, it's like it's here. I'm recognizing it. Is this about control and really asking yourself that question, or lack of control, and deciding that and then moving forward and just pushing through it, right? It's the only way to overcome it, right? You can't, to your point, Susan, maladaptive, you can't avoid it. So you got two choices, either avoidance or do it
Let
and
it
push through.
or let it rip,
Let it rip. Yeah.
as we like to say. Sonia, before we land this plane for reals, I of course have to ask you the legacy question. You're just mentioning it in terms of your work with your clients. So, what would you say you want the legacy of this model of excellence in and around self-regulation and being able to intuitively work with your emotions for the purposes of, high performance? What do you want the legacy of this work to be someday?
I think it really boils down to being a part of this movement where we break the cycle of stress addiction and we show people there's a different way to live, there's a different way to succeed and get to where you want to go without sacrificing your mental and emotional health. And it's a lot easier than we think. And it actually, the byproduct of it is this beautiful co-creation with yourself, and this exploration of yourself. You just become so much more of a resilient and fulfilled and satisfied person. So that's really what motivates me and makes me want to keep doing this work.
Amazing. Ladies, what would you like to leave our audience with today? Leanne, Shell, any
Uh,
final remarks for our crowd?
Final remarks. Fear, push forward. And to Sonia's point about stressors, like the awareness piece of it, right? I think we need to do a better job of being aware versus just avoiding and accepting that that's our norm, because it's actually not. And you will hit the wall, and at some point, you're going to spiral. So the awareness piece of it, I think, is extremely important for a lot of executives, or anybody actually for that matter.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would agree with that. I think, the awareness, the mindfulness, whatever you want to call it, is like, it's often one of these things that, people read about or hear about and kind of think, yeah, what's that going to do for me? Right. And I mean, obviously we teach so much at Elite that it's like, it's everything. The more aware you are, the more ability you have to actually consciously intervene or fix the problems of the situation. So thank you for highlighting that from your perspective, because I think that that's always something that we want to drive home here.
Yeah, this is why EQ was rated the number one leadership skill of them all here in 2025, because it actually is what sets the conditions for AQ, which maybe most people don't recognize that acronym, but it's just our adaptability quotient in terms of how adaptable we're able to be in the face of adversity, which we've kind of been looking at a lot on this show thus far here in 2025. We know we've got a whole new batch of generations that are entirely different than ours coming up behind us. We've been talking about the Gen Zs and millennials, and I know from having one in my home that I'm raising right now, they don't respond to an unregulated leader. Anytime I get upregulated, Brooklyn just shuts down and she disengages. I can't get her attention in order to influence her as a leader, as her parent, unless I'm in a down-regulated state. And I think as well, we've got AI that's coming down this pike at a really accelerated clip. And that disruption is going to push us into the most uncertainty we've experienced since they're saying the arrival of the internet. So we can't deny this opportunity to step into this level of mindfulness, this level of conscious leadership. It is absolutely going to be the table stakes for anybody that's looking to sustain positions of leadership in any area of performance, we believe. This is how, together, we're all going to change the way this game is being played, because we know there is a massive ripple effect that ensues from somebody who holds a position of power like a leader. They carry so much weight and so much influence. I just think that's the call for everybody listening today. If this is something that you feel curious about, trust those somatic indicators, please, because that intuition is definitely trying to put this on your radar so that you can prioritize this in your leadership development here in 2025. Sonia, this has been so much fun, as I knew it would be, as it always is when I get to bring you in studio and riff with us. I'm so excited to have this conversation right now, especially. If anybody out there is resonating with this, which I know they will be, how can they find you? How would you like them to find you?
Yeah, so you can shoot me an email, sonia@heartvistaperformance.com. Hop on over to my website. You have all the information there, heartvistaperformance.com, or find me on LinkedIn. I think we'll link out in the show notes. Connect, let me know what's on your mind. I love just connecting and chatting with people and just having a little virtual coffee date. That's always fun. So I appreciate you having me on. It was lovely to see you, all three ladies.
That's why I had to ask. I know my Aquarian twin over there is always looking to connect. So please reach out to Sonia and have a conversation if you're at all
One more
curious.
thing. I'm sorry, I forgot to say
Hit
one more
us.
thing. I have a little bit of homework for all the listeners.
Yay!
There, as you go on my website, if you input your email address, you'll be sent a quick little 5-minute let's call it
Meditation?
a technique. Yeah, a little meditation technique that as you learn, you can start doing with your eyes open. But my homework for you is to take a look at your calendar, do a little calendar audit, and see where you can insert those s'mores, those small moments of recovery, especially to prep before big meetings. Pull out that audio recording that I sent you, take those 5 minutes, do the recording, do the technique, and then go into your meeting and see how you feel on the other side of that. And keep repeating that. Keep repeating that throughout your week. And just start to be, again, a more aware and see how this can really become a competitive advantage to you, right?
Woo!
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Love
No,
that.
you
That's amazing.
didn't.
Yeah.
She threw out the competitive advantage carrot. That's what we're suggesting is true. This is a game changer experience, but only if you step into the experience itself. This cannot be an intellectual exercise only. That will not affect change, right? So please take Sonia up on her generous offer. Yeah, you're hearing from all of us. This is absolutely the table stakes here in terms of your leadership game in 2025. So I also just want to thank our audience. We're here this year focusing on co-creation. We've asked for your engagement in regards to sending us questions and dropping us a line in terms of what it is that you'd like for us to explore with our experts on this show. That's how we came up with the fear question. But please, 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 if you're feeling inspired by any part of this conversation to learn more, for us to go deeper in some area, or if there's something that we just didn't hit today that you'd like to hear more about, drop us a comment. You can drop us a line at, you can email me at susan@elitehighperformance.com, or you can drop us a comment on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform. Share this episode with a friend, maybe one who you know needs to learn about how to self-regulate or down-regulate. Help us spread that ripple effect. And thank you again for tuning in. We'll see everyone next week.